about the big march at the weekend, and of course the fact that Keir Starmer and many Labour apparatchiks are sort of trying to make out that it was a hate march, that it was full of people from the far right, which clearly wasn't, and also the numbers of people there very much underestimated by the authorities, who said it was only about 110,000. We'll talk to Trevor in one moment. Harry Cole is here as well, editor-at-large for The Sun. He'll be telling us all about Donald Trump's trip, and then of course we'll go down there to Windsor to talk to Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor at The Sun, who's going to be telling us what we can expect from Donald Trump's first day in Britain on his second state visit, unprecedented second state visit, with the dreaded Keir Starmer. Let's talk to Trevor Kavanagh right now. Trevor, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. I mean, this march was quite an extraordinary event, wasn't it? I mean, there were so many bits of it, I suppose, in a way, but you've made the point today that the Prime Minister has once again got this wrong, because he doesn't seem to recognise the voices of the silent majority.
Yes, and I wasn't there, but I gather that they were a very peaceful cross-section of society who are alarmed by not just what's happened over the first 14 months of Starmer's government, but over the last 25 years. These were not far-right representatives of extremism or any other form of racism or fascism, as they were branded immediately by Starmer and co. This was a remarkable expression of pent-up anger over the way the country has been mismanaged, particularly over the last 15 years, but in fact since the Blair government was elected 25 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you talk about how tin-eared Keir Starmer is, and he does appear to be that, doesn't he? He puts out these rather inane tweets every so often. Like he put one out yesterday talking about how, you know, we must not lose our country to the forces of division. Well, he's responsible for dividing the country more than anybody, isn't he?
Well, I think the big problem with Keir Starmer is that he doesn't have a political bone in his body.
Yeah.
He seems to be utterly incompetent at the very basic processes of running anything, let alone an entire nation. He messes things up every single day, and sometimes more than once a day. The fact is, as I think more than one person has now suggested, he cannot survive till the next election as Prime Minister. However, he's already exceeded my predictions, which was even before the election, that he wouldn't last beyond this year's spring local elections. He survived that long, and he probably will survive, actually, until next year's disastrous repeat of those elections, simply because of the structure of the Labour Party and its absence of any real method of getting rid of a serving leader.
But the problem is, though, for him, is that he is so two-tiered in his approach to everything, because as you point out in your piece, you know, he didn't say anything about all the arrests that took place at the Notting Hill Carnival, of which there was something like 550, but he makes a point of drawing attention to the 25 arrests that happened at this march in London at the weekend. I believe only about less than half of whom were eventually charged with anything.
Yes, I think you were very kind there in describing him as two-tiered. I think two-faced hypocrite would be a much more appropriate expression.
Yeah.
This is a man who has ducked and dived and done one thing and then done the opposite all the way through his political career. And in fact, he's been more or less incompetent, even in his days as what you might regard as a Rolls-Royce lawyer at King's Counsel, when he was leader of the Crown Prosecution Service, the state prosecutor. He was clumsy and failing to do his duty, for instance, on the mostly Pakistani rape gangs that were prowling through the country and hitting young girls. This is a mark of his ineptitude from the very start of his public profile. The worst thing, though, Mike, is not that he is almost certain to go. It is who replaces him. And we may even think back in a couple of years' time to the wonderful days of Keir Starmer.
Well, let's hope it doesn't get much worse, but every day I come in it gets worse, and so I've started to become much less of an optimist than I used to be. But it's funny about his time at the CPS, because I was told by someone who worked with him there, funnily enough, who's now an MP, that when he was there, he was more of an administrator than he was a lawyer. He wasn't somebody who went into court and actually acted in cases. He didn't actually practice the art of being a barrister, because you and I know plenty of barristers and they're all pretty smart people and they're all pretty quick thinkers on their feet. He's not one of those. And so he was effectively this kind of rather lumbering, blundering sort of, you know, chief civil servant, if you like, of the CPS, more than he was a lawyer.
Yes, and I think I'd go further and say that he was actually a maladministrator. He was the man, after all, who triggered the prosecution of 24 totally innocent Sun journalists and ex-journalists on the News of the World for offences on which every single one of them was cleared in the appeal court and indeed even in the Old Bailey. And that was a witch hunt, a calculated witch hunt, which I think he was acting under pressure from senior Labour Party figures, one in particular. This is the mark of the man. I think he does whatever he thinks he needs to do to get from here to there. That's perhaps an interval of 24 hours. And if necessary, he then does a complete somersault and does the opposite to suit whatever purpose comes along. But as I say, we are now in the position where the party itself, the cabinet itself, is talking almost openly about dumping him as the party leader and prime minister. The problem is there need to be at least 80 Tory Labour MPs who are prepared to stand up and back a rival candidate, and at the moment there isn't one. And the only next way would be for the cabinet itself to turn on Starmer and say you've got to resign. But you know the consequences of that. You have to look around at the likely runners and riders, and there aren't any good options there.
No, there really aren't. I mean, they can't get, but as I say, you just think, even if somebody was vaguely more competent than him, but I don't think there is anyone. I mean, Shabana Mahmood came in and was said to be a great operator, and she's mouthed off about how she will stop at nothing and she will do everything in her power to stop the migrants from coming to this country. And all that's happened since she's been in charge is that the numbers have gone massively up. And on Saturday, we're going to get a flight full of migrants coming from France, flying into Heathrow, who have already been invited in. So actually the result is we've got even more coming than we had before she was our Home Secretary.
Exactly. Now, you've got to remember, and I say this very sensitively, that Mahmoud is a Muslim, and she has a record of speaking vocally against the Israelis in Gaza and indeed for the pro-Palestinian movement. It is very difficult to imagine from that stance that she actively opposes the immigration of people from countries from a similar background, and I think that the whole policy has already fallen apart, which I think speaks volumes about her commitment. I think that what we need to do, Mike, is not consider who succeeds Keir Starmer, as inevitably someone will, but the fact that we need, if he goes, a general election, because that would be grounds, I think here the opposition, whether it's Labour or Reform, a right to be saying that if he is dumped, we need a general election.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what will happen, because that's what I've been predicting, really, for over a year now. Trevor, great to see you. Great piece in the paper, as ever.